Today, we are going to combine the children's sermon and the adult sermon into one sermon, and that's going to be right now. So Miss Michelle is bringing the kiddos in from the nursery. And actually, Miss Michelle, could you please help the kiddos take off their shoes and put them on the rug, please?
Will do.
You guys come up here. We're going to have story time, and we're going to get all comfy cozy and leave our shoes out there, okay? Come on, let's go leave our shoes. They're going to go out on the carpet, on the brown carpet. As soon as you've got your shoes off, come on in. One little girl this morning sat down and she said, "My feet smell like corn chips." That's what my dad always says. All right, so let's get crisscross applesauce, comfy cozy.
Just a few more.
Spoons in the bowl.
We'll have a few more Carri'e.
Today we're having story time. And do you guys ever listen to stories in school? You guys, I want to see your best listening behavior, okay? Very good. Today I'm going to tell one of my favorite stories. Once upon a time, there was a boy named Chris. And Chris lived with his mom. And Chris did a lot of the same things you did. He lives with his mom, he helps out around the house, he has friends, he likes to play with toys, he likes to play outside, he went to school, same kind of things you guys do. And every year at the end of school, his teacher would ask him, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" How many of you have ever heard that question? Yep. Does anyone here know what they want to be when they grow up? Who wants to share with me what they want to be? Johnny. A teacher. Oh, you'd be fabulous. Caroline. An interior designer. Lovely. Alex. Geologist. Nadia. A doctor. Sweet. Adelaide.
A priest.
Being a priest is a great job. Cordelia. You want to be Supergirl when you grow up. You're on a good start because you were already super. Brooke. I'm Bree. Bree, what do you want to be? You want to be a priest? Yeah! How about a teacher, but then during the summer, an astronaut. I love it. Elliot. A nanoscientist. So you want to be a very small scientist? So you can cure cancer. Oh, this is not a joke here. Lovely. I love that. A lawyer. Oh, what? Alexander Fawcett. What about you? A police officer. You guys all have jobs that remind me of Jesus, because Jesus was a priest and a teacher and someone who loved justice. And he turned over the tables in the temple, so we have a little interior design. So there's a lot of connections there, which is absolutely lovely. And Jesus is the light of the world, and I think we can kind of make an astronaut connection. So yeah, very lovely. But Chris didn't know what he wanted to be when he grew up. How many of you guys don't know what you want to be when you grow up? You want to be a Teddy? Oh, you want to be a kitty when you grow up? Oh, lovely. Lovely. frustrated. When I was his age, I wanted to be a ventriloquist. That's the kind of puppets and you don't move your mouth. As it turns out, that was not well suited to my gift. So Chris did not know what he wanted to do, and he would get frustrated, and he said, "Mom, how does someone know what they want to be when they grow up? I'm just a kid. How can I know?" And his mother said something very wise. She said, "You got to figure out what you're good at and figure out what the world needs and put them together." Like Elliot. Elliot's good at science and figuring stuff out, right? And the world needs a cure for cancer, so he's putting those things together. Jesus was a healer too, so it's also Jesus. Right? So you figure out what you're good at and what the world needs, and you put those two things together. He thought about that a lot. And he grew up and he went through years and years of school, and when he was done with school, it came a time where he had to figure out what he wanted to do. And he said, "Mom, can you please help me figure out what I'm good at? Because sometimes when we don't, when we don't know what we're good at, the people around us who love us can see that in us. So we can always ask the people who know us and love us what we're good at." And she said, "Chris, you're really good at giving people presents." She said he was always good at giving people presents. Ever since he was little, when he would make his mother a card, it always had just the right words and just the right picture that was right for her. And sometimes his mom would take him to the dollar store or Five Below to buy presents for his family and friends. And he always knew how to pick out exactly something that they liked that would help their life and make them happy. So then he thought, what does the world need? Now he's someone who loves Jesus very much. And he said, sometimes I think the world needs help remembering what's important. So for instance, on birthdays, is it more important to give thanks for your life or to get cool presents? Thanks for your life, right. Kind of setting this up. And at Christmas time, is it more important to be thankful for Jesus' birth or get some presents? Jesus' birth, that's right. And so Chris was worried that some people were losing sight of this and spending more time thinking about money and gifts and stuff. So he said, I think the world needs to remember Jesus and his generosity and his giving. You can check out my vestments all you want, honey. You can even have this one day. And so then he said, okay, I've got a plan. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give God's people presents on Christmas Day because it's Jesus' birthday. And that way I can help them remember that Jesus is generous. Also, it's kind of a flippy thing, isn't it? It's kind of what Jesus did. Usually on your birthday, do you give presents or get presents? Get presents. But Jesus flipped things around, and so he likes us to get presents on his birthday. You got to pay attention to Jesus, because he likes to flip things around. He's the kind of guy who said the last shall be first and the first shall be last. Yep, it is weird. And people in his day thought it was weird too. And he also said, the mighty will be cast out from their thrones and the lowly lifted up. He said, whoever wants to be great among you must be a servant. And then the servants are great. Jesus came to mix things up. Right? So there was Chris. He needed to find a place for his workshop, and he wanted to go to Florida. But Florida's property frozen tundra before he could find any land that he could afford. And then he had to find workers to help make all those toys, didn't he?
His elves.
And he found a group of elves that because they were so short, they were having trouble getting hired anywhere else. People didn't see that because of their small size and small hands, they could do quite a bit of work. They were great workers. So he hired all the elves, and they unionized and made sure they had weekends and safe working conditions. And he got it all set up. And he said, okay, the last thing I need is a name. And he thought about all the stories his mom would tell him when he was growing up. He thought about the story of St. Catherine, who loved music, St. George, who slayed the dragon, St. Joan of Arc, who was brave in battle. Thought about all these saints, St. Francis, who loved animals. And he said, you know what, I got it. I remember the story my mom used to tell me on December 6th every year. The story of St. Nicholas. St. Nicholas lived a long, long time ago. Who knows what year it is right now? What year is it, Alex? It's 2016 right now. So 2016. That's a big number. Nicholas lived in the 300s. So if we're in the 2000s right now, he lived in the 300s. It was a long, long time ago. He lived in a country that we now call Turkey.
Turkey.
Not that kind of Turkey. Turkey's a real country. And he was a priest and then a bishop. Elliot. Five below is an ancient tradition. Yes, Cordelia. It was 5 shekels and below. Adelaide. Yes, I'm going to get to that story. So St. Nicholas lived in a town called Myra in Turkey. And although Nicholas came from a very rich family, a lot of the merchants in his area were very, very poor. And back then, a woman's family needed a lot of money for her to get married. Actually, that's kind of true today too, isn't it? In a different way, we don't call it a dowry.
And then it became Mrs. Claus.
So he needed money for his daughters to get married. And if he didn't have enough money, they were going to get sold into slavery. This is a long time ago. Don't worry, that doesn't happen anymore. Slavery? That's when all your choices are taken away. You got to work hard and not make any money. And so the dad, the night before his daughter was going to need to either get married or sold into slavery, he was so worried about his future that he wept and wept and wept all night. He cried himself to sleep. And then in the morning, when he awoke, he found a bag of gold coins that had been thrown into the open window. Enough money for his daughter to get married and not be sold into slavery. And the dad rejoiced and the daughter rejoiced and everyone was happy. You know how that gold had gotten there? Nicholas, the bishop, had heard about the family's misfortunes, because sometimes you hear about these things when you're clergy. And he had come in the middle of the night and dropped a bag of gold as a surprise. He didn't want any credit for himself. He just really wanted them to have what they needed. And then the second daughter, it came time for her to either get married or sold into slavery, and the man didn't have any money, and so he wept and wept and wept and cried himself to sleep. And St. Nicholas came. And he dropped in a bag of gold coins. And when he woke up, the man had enough money so that his daughter could get married. And the man rejoiced. And was putting that gold in our house because I would really like to thank them. Now usually if a stranger comes in the middle of the night and finds an open window and there's a bag of gold in a different place, it's usually because someone came in and took it, right? But this is a Jesus story, so the gold goes into the house. See how we're turning things around? Yep. Ellie just said this does not work for our society. Yes, we're talking about a very counter-cultural Jesus movement. If this is blowing your mind, it means you're getting it. So he went to sleep and he wept and he wept and he wept and he almost cried himself to sleep, except he kept one eye peeking because he wanted to see what happened. And in the middle of the night, when everyone was asleep, through the open window came a bag of gold. And the merchant, the father, ran outside because he wanted to thank whoever left it for him. And then he saw Bishop Nicholas creeping off in the night, and he looked at him and just went, Nicholas had given them the money that they needed, not because he wanted any praise for himself, but because he was living out Jesus' generosity. So, Chris decided that his name would be St. Nicholas. And so sometimes we call him St. Nicholas, sometimes we call him Sant Niklaus, and sometimes we call him Santa Claus. So now every year on December 6th, when we celebrate St. Nicholas, sometimes children leave their shoes out, and in the shoes, while they're sleeping, there's a little bag of treats. And sometimes a toy. And so it's all because Chris and Santa Claus love Jesus and wants us to remember God's generosity to us. Alex.
And Santa says we're all God's children.
Also, it always lands in your shoe. Well, let's stand up and say a little.